Pawn play, right, new series. I'm going to just try to be teaching you the most important things for your chess development. No BS, just the things you actually need to know if you want to get better at chess. Now, I understand that the hardest thing to probably learn as a beginner is strategy. So we're going to focus today on pawns, specifically isolated pawns. If you can understand this, it's really going to help. So we quickly look at this. This is an isolated pawn. If you didn't know, this is an isolated pawn because there is no pawn that can support it on the either left or right file. If you see this, no pawns on here, so it's isolated. If we look at this pawn, well, it can always be defended. So that's an isolated pawn. Now let me show you a more like proper real example so it can maybe click in your head a bit more. So I'll show you how we get them. We can get them from any really opening. We get them, you know, there's a couple openings that you get them from. For example, I'm showing you the pan of attack. We get something like this, right? Now, the advantage of an isolated pawn is obviously good central control. Do you see how we control more squares just with this pawn? And if we keep looking how the game unfolds, you also notice that we've got a spatial advantage. So a spatial advantage is extremely important in chess because when you control the center, when you've got more space, you know, that's really important. Now, let me tell you something else. The quick development is another thing, but I'm going to tell you how you should play with the isolated pawn. So you do not want to exchange pieces. You want to keep your pieces on the board. Having your pieces, especially your minor pieces, it's all right to exchange major pieces, but if you exchange minor pieces, then, you know, your advantage kind of vanishes because the isolated pawn is actually an advantage in the opening and the middle game. So in the opening and the middle game, you've got the advantage. Now, black's strategy is going to be around neutralizing that advantage. If you've never really understood what strategy means, well, that is part of the strategy. You can't be good at strategy if you don't know anything about, you know, things like isolated pawns. So also another thing is that you get open files. Now, open files are valuable. Put your rooks on them, more control of the chessboard. Now, if you do end up getting into a position where you have to exchange pieces, make sure you get some sort of compensation for that. Like, you know, black has like gone out of their way to kind of damage their pawn structure. So you don't want, like, for example, like if here we see a move like after this, we see a move maybe like this. You know, you don't want to allow your opponent to just take that. You want to retreat it. It's simple things like that. It's the simple basic things. And now another part of the strategy for you, if you do end up playing with the isolated pawn, you may want to exchange it. You might want to exchange it, for example, show you how this game continued. Here, we played the move d5 because part of black's strategy here is going to be defending this square. Your strategy is going to involve you pushing this pawn maybe. You know, so for example, the more minor pieces you have on the board, the greater advantage white has. White is going to have an advantage, but the less pieces, you know, the advantage is going to fade. And let me go over the weaknesses now so you understand the positives and the weaknesses. Right, so let me get into the weaknesses. Now, the first weakness is that the pawn is going to be weak in the endgame. Like I said, the advantage really lies in the opening and the middle game. For example, here, it doesn't really matter what we do. Black is always going to be better. For example, the evaluation here is just minus 6.3. You're going to lose this ending because notice how you're always tied down to the defense of this pawn. So you don't want to get into an ending. Like, you're absolutely cooked here. And now the second thing that is extremely important that you understand is that the square in front of it is going to be weak. It might serve as an outpost for the knight. You know, you never know. Black really wants to control the square in front. They're going to make sure they've got things like this. For example, if I show you a little line back here and this continues, well, they're going to try to put their bishop here. If you play stupid moves, they're going to control the square nicely, and you're going to be in big trouble because once they get a knight here, knights are best when they're on outposts. And what is an outpost? An outpost is a square that can't be attacked by pawns. So, you know, it's going to be good for the knights. And obviously, when I'm saying all this, you can also think about it if your opponent is playing with the isolated pawn. Normally, if your opponent is, you know, he's probably going to be quite an aggressive player. Maybe you like to play it yourself. Me, myself, I'm more of a solo player. I would normally prefer to play with the black pieces here. But I think it's also really nice to play with the isolated pawn, and it can really help your chess development. Now, another thing you have to think about is it can be quite psychologically taxing to play with the isolated pawn because you're always worried about exchanging pieces. For example, I think they say when you've got 5 minor pieces, or how many is, yeah, when you've got all your pieces on the board, obviously white is better, but the less, so it's going to be quite psychologically difficult to play with the isolated pawn. And also, one thing I wanted to add is that you can get them from openings like the Caro-Con. There's lots of openings you can get them from, things like the Caro-Con, like I just showed you, like the panel variation. You can also get them from some d4 openings, like the Tarrasch. Black can also have the isolated pawn. But it's quite an interesting concept anyway, and hopefully this video helps you. Anyway, that is the end of the video. Hopefully this video was valuable to you. I didn't want to make it long and tedious. I just want to make it short and snappy. So now hopefully you understand the isolated pawn a bit better. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you're interested in doing some coaching with me, feel free to click the link in the description. Thank you for your time and attention. It is much appreciated. Have a good day.